chamber team. Good to have you here, Joe, Jack. Well, good evening, everybody. It is Thursday, September 9th, 2021. This is the Edina City Council. It is 7:03 p.m. And before we start the meeting tonight, which is now in hybrid form, I just want to have a little moment of silence for all of us in the chambers and in our community for a little girl who lost her life this week on Labor Day evening. A moment of silence, please, for Ikhlas Abdullahi Ahmed. Thanks, everyone. I went down to the Mobile Command Center on Labor Day evening after dark. There were people from the adjoining neighborhoods, even though our police force had the area blocked off, people coming in with flashlights and headlamps trying to find this little girl. It was really something to behold, something that we should really be proud of our residents about. Kids are number one in Edina, we all know that, and everybody rallied to the cause of trying to find her. And then when I talked to our chief, our new chief, Todd Milburn, who's with us this evening, we knew that we had a great leader to handle this situation, both with respect to directing his own people, but the 150 professionals that were there the next morning when I was back down at the command center, folks coming from Hennepin County, the experts they had from our neighboring communities of Bloomington, Minnetonka. The mobile command center came up from Savage, and the chief was right in the middle of everything, and then handling the press as well. And I don't know if you got a chance to see his interviews, but they were really well done. And to all those professionals that came to try to help find this little girl on a search and rescue basis, they did their best, and it became a search and recover effort when she was spotted by a jogger that was coming by that following afternoon. So, Chief, thank you for all your excellent work. You seemed like you fit in Edina right away and were the perfect hire for us, even though you'd only been here for a few weeks. We thank you so much for the leadership you provided, and please express to all the professionals that work for you and all of the agencies and other police departments that came on this joint powers basis to help us. It was a truly magnificent effort to try to find this little girl. Thank you very much. All right, now before we start the meeting this evening, one additional matter that we usually handle, and that is that because of COVID, we're back live since July 21st, but we're handling everything on a hybrid sort of basis. So folks can tune into the meetings live. They can call in during community comment if it's a matter that's not on the agenda this evening or a matter scheduled for a future public hearing. And if you want to call in during the public comment portion of the agenda, or you want to call in during one of these public hearings that we're going to have, I think there's 3 public hearings this evening. Here's the call-in number. It's 800-374-0221, 800-374-0221. The conference ID number is 1788657, 1788657. Give the operator your name, your street address, and your phone number, and we'll get you in the queue. And just a reminder that you'll have 3 minutes to speak, whether you're in the chambers and wish to speak to the council, or you're going to call in remote to talk to the council about a matter of concern to you on either the public hearing matter or concerns the public comment portion of the agenda. Keep that in mind, that you'll have 3 minutes, and I think somebody here will be reminding you when you hit the 3-minute mark. So having said that, let's call the meeting to order, and let's do roll call. Clerk Allison.
Councilmember Anderson.
Here.
Councilmember Jackson. Here. Councilmember Pierce. Councilmember Staunton.
Here.
Mayor Hovland.
Here. Next matter before us this evening is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And just back to Ikhlas Abdullahi Ahmed for a moment, I wanted to make sure that her family knows how much our community cares about them and how much empathy and sympathy we have for the situation that they face. And I know a GoFundMe page was started to help with funeral expenses, and there's just been tremendous cooperation there and a very high level of donation to help this family out. So that's something to keep in mind for folks too. All right, we have a form of meeting agenda in front of us this evening. Is anyone that wish to modify the agenda? Manager Neal, anything that you want to
No
add
changes.
or take off? All
No
right.
changes from
Is there a
staff.
motion to approve the meeting agenda as shown?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Member Jackson, second by Member Anderson to approve the meeting agenda as published. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the meeting agenda as shown, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. And now we are on to community comment. So whether you are here in chambers and wish to comment to the council about something that's not on the agenda this evening or scheduled for a future public hearing, you're sure welcome to come up and address us for 3 minutes. And then if you're listening to the meeting and want to call in for public comment, Dan will let us know if we get somebody in the queue there to speak. So is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address the council on a matter of concern to them in the community comment portion of the agenda? All right, anybody waiting online?
We do have one caller waiting online, so if the operator can please unmute the line of Lori Groats. And Ms. Groats, please state your name and address for the record.
Would you restate that, please?
Yes,
Yes, we have one caller on the line. Lori Groats is on the line, and
All right,
her line's
thank
been
you.
unmuted.
I'm Lori Groats, 5513 Park Place. I'm calling to request to please have a COVID update at City Hall. Number one, how many full-time staff and part-time staff does the city employ? What percentage of city staff are currently vaccinated? Which departments besides the building department are back working in City Hall? Is vaccination being required for prior to return to work for employees? If not, is there a testing requirement? How many staff have had COVID, and when was the last case? And finally, will employees have the option of permanently working from home? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Groats. Anyone else on the line?
We do not have any other callers. If you want to wait about 30 seconds to a minute just to allow the broadcast to catch up.
Thank you. Anyone else coming online?
We do not have any other callers.
All right, very good. I think we'll move on. The next portion of the agenda deals with the city manager's response to comments that have been made by community members at the prior meeting. And I'm going to turn now to Manager Neal to ask him to address any of those comments that occurred at the prior city council meeting and then also give him some latitude on whether he wants to address the question that was just raised by Lori Groats this week or 2 weeks from tonight.
Well, thank you, Your Honor. I'll start with that aspect of community comment first. There are some very specific questions in that, and we would definitely need to gain some knowledge about infection rates and so forth. So that I'll come back in 2 weeks with that information. Some of it we may not be able to share, given personal medical information, but to the extent that we can share, if it's public data, we'll be prepared to share that for sure.
Very good.
The previous council meeting, we had two folks who contributed with community comment. The first was Greg Wilson. He talked about a particular city ordinance, 36.1260, and this is regarding public lighting. And he asked whether the city would consider changing its lighting standards and methodology around how we measure lighting. And so we are taking a look at that. It's not a small change. But we will take a look at it from a staff perspective and bring some thoughts back to the council about how to move forward with that, if at all. The other question, the other commenter was Nora Davis, and Nora expressed some concerns about the development, specifically development that was happening at Valley View, Wooddale and Valley View. And her concerns were relatively specific. She thought that this development was contrary to the comp plan and contrary to the small area plan. And I did have a chance to briefly talk with our community development director, Mr. Teague, and he assures me it's compliant with both of those documents, those fundamental documents. So. She also had some concerns about a large dirt pile down there. We share those concerns. The dirt pile has an erosion protection around it now. I don't think it did. It may not have when she talked about it before, but it does now. And we will encourage the construction process there to eliminate that as quickly as we can. And that was it.
All right, good. Thank you. That prompt any thoughts from council members based upon that report? All right. Next matter on the agenda is the adoption of the items on the consent agenda. Is there anyone on the council that wishes to remove an item from the consent agenda? Hearing nothing, is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda items in their totality in a single motion?
So moved.
Member Jackson moves.
Second.
Member Staunton seconds. The adoption of the consent agenda. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adopting the consent agenda items listed in a single motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. What is our usual practice is to the extent that we might have donations covered by one of the items in the consent agenda, we like to let folks know about that. And it's just coming up here now on my screen. So we had a couple of donations on behalf of the city of Edina. The crime fund, Edina Crime Fund, Crime Prevention Fund, donated almost $3,000 for a Mobile Pro laptop to the police department. And then in the Park and Rec department, Jennifer Prestis Lukaska had a wonderful $500 donation for a memorial paver stone, I'm sure for one of her relatives, one of their family members. So thanks to that organization, the Edina Crime Prevention Fund. And just by way of reminder, the Fall Into the Arts Festival, sponsored by the Edina Crime Prevention Fund, is this weekend. And so encourage folks to attend that. I think they've got 200, maybe Shelley Loberg, when she comes up, can tell us a little bit about that. And Kevin, you're on the crime fund as well. So I don't know if you know the number of displayers or artists that they have involved.
I'm going to be down at the booth from 12 to 3 on Saturday.
All right.
It's always a great event.
And then, all right, let's move on. Special recognitions and presentations. So tonight is the night that we get an annual report from the Edina Chamber of Commerce on the Explore Edina activities, and City Manager Scott Neal will introduce the topic, and then Shelley Loberg, the Vice President of the Edina Chamber, who also runs the Explore Edina operation, is here with us this evening, as well as some of the board members for the Chamber and Explore Edina. So welcome. Thanks for being here this evening. Go ahead, Manager Neal.
Thank you, Your Honor. In 2014, the City Council adopted the necessary legal structure to impose a 3% lodging tax on lodging that occurs, hotel, motel lodging that occurs within the city. When we did that, we also made an agreement with the Edina Chamber of Commerce to act as the city's convention and tourism board. And it's important because that part of the lodging tax requires some mechanism to account for how that money is not only collected but how it is spent. And in our case, we took a look at whether we wanted to establish an internal Convention and Visitors Bureau with our own internal staff, but we didn't do that. We went another direction, and that was to enter into a cooperative agreement with the Chamber. That cooperative agreement established a board of directors. The mayor and I are both part of that board as ex officio members. It also requires that board to bring its annual budget to the city council for an approval. The way that our budget cycle is working this year, this was the night that worked best for us. So I did ask Lori Severson if she could sequence their budget action to occur tonight. She's not able to be with us tonight, but Shelley Loberg is here in her place and is ready to give that presentation. So that's what I have.
Thank you, Manager Neal. Ms. Loberg, welcome.
Thank you.
Dan, do I just use this?
Okay, thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for the introduction, Manager Neal, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, and all the council members. It's always a pleasure to come and speak before you once a year and talk about what we're doing at the Visitor Bureau. One of my personal passions is travel, and so I was originally hired, it's been just 7 years ago, to establish this brand and begin the Visitors Bureau for the city of Edina. Okay. Thank you. As Scott mentioned, Explore Edina was established in 2014. And he did talk a little bit about funds and lodging tax. There is a statute in the state of Minnesota that actually governs how lodging tax can be spent if a city chooses to collect it. 95% of those funds are required to create a Convention and Visitors Bureau, as Scott mentioned, and then the city is actually allowed to keep the other 5% for administrative purposes. In 2015, we developed what we call our Edina Destination Guide, which is digital this year, but in the past has been a printed magazine that promotes all of the city's tourism amenities and our lodging properties and all the city-owned attractions. We also established ExploreEdina.com, social media channels, and a regional marketing plan. The mission of Explore Edina is to attract regional, national, and international visitors to Edina, thereby increasing revenues, stimulating economic development, and creating positive awareness for the community's tourism assets. I always like to tell people it's really about the Twin Cities metro area. When a visitor comes out of town, they don't know when they're going from Richfield to Bloomington to Edina. So as much as we promote Edina's assets and what's here within our city, we also want to promote our proximity, which is wonderful because of our centrality in the Twin Cities to other points of interest that a visitor would partake in when they're here. So our proximity to downtown Minneapolis, to the Mall of America, and the Minnesota Zoo, and all the other things that a visitor would do while they are here. We want to promote retail and hospitality in Edina. I spend a lot of time working with the retail community. I think we have a really special retail community here in this city. And we want to support the marketing of leisure advertising for Edina lodging properties. The lodging properties and the retail entities tend to do local, or they tend to do a lot of business travel marketing. So the leisure marketing that we do for the city is really important for our lodging properties. Some trends that I'm seeing right now, and these are all statistics through the U.S. Travel Association. Currently in 2021, and what I expect to see throughout 2022, is that domestic travel spending is increasing monthly right now. In July, domestic travel spending reflected a drop of just 6.5% below July of 2019. So in that July timeframe, we were only about 6% behind 2019 levels, which is that's optimistic. Of course, none of us have a crystal ball, and we don't know what's happening with the variant from day to day, from week to week. Certainly, as we approach winter months, that's always our slower season, particularly here in Minnesota. But right now, we are definitely experiencing a peak. Overseas arrivals in the U.S. are down 78%. So that is very significant. Obviously, I don't have to explain why. Business travel is coming back. I'm seeing a lot of regional travel in our hotels, both leisure and business. The business travel that I haven't seen come back significantly yet would be the more of the fly-in business from further away. So statistically, 77% are willing to travel for business right now. So I believe that's also optimistic. 22 highlights. We will look at some new concepts. One of them is building an all-encompassing strategy that highlights Edina's well-being assets. We want to make sure we market all of the great healthcare here in our city while showcasing the integration of retail, hospitality, and related services. Also, Jim and Lori and some other stakeholders have been involved in a strategy to market assets along France Avenue. So there is some branding being talked about there. Continuing to support the retail and hospitality community and the city-owned attractions, which with a regional marketing campaign will also remain important. A couple years ago, we partook in some conversations within our board of directors and here at City Council about taking lodging tax revenue and supporting city events. If you look at the state statute, it does very specifically say that the money is to be used for marketing and advertising. Community to community, certainly across the state, that does vary slightly. We decided within our board of directors that we would take 1/12 of the previous year's lodging revenues and that we would dedicate that in our budget to supporting city events. Historically, we have done the Edina Art Fair through sponsorship, the Edina 4th of July Parade, and the Edina Fall into the Arts Festival. The Torchlight Concert Lighthouse Night is another small event at Centennial Lakes Park that does draw people into the city. That would be another potential opportunity. So we're always looking for just connecting with community organizations to learn about new events that the Visitor Bureau can support. Jim, just to comment on the Fall into the Arts Festival, we have fewer artists this year. I do think the variant probably did impact that. We normally have around 225 artists displaying at that event, and we've got just under 200 this year. But still a really robust event, and it's really creating a lot of traffic on Facebook and Instagram, and we're really excited. We still have a lot of sponsorship support and support from food vendors as well. Lodging revenue, this is just a year-by-year recap. You can see from 2018 through what we're projecting in 22. Obviously, you can pay some special attention to 2020, where our revenue was down over 60%. Actually, in March of 2020, our revenue was down about 80%. So we have seen some very gradual increases month to month during 2021, and do project that will continue throughout 2022. The lodging industry as a whole, per the U.S. Travel Association, is not expected to fully recover until sometime in 2023. This is just a brief financial review of lodging expenses, lodging tax revenue, expenses, personnel costs, and occupancy, and then what we keep in reserve. So this is just kind of a comparison from 2017 through 2020. If you have any questions about that, I'm happy to address that, and also have our treasurer with us this evening too. I believe that's it.
Questions for Ms. Loberg? Member Jackson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I was looking at your balance sheet here, and I saw that there's a fashion show listed under expenses for this year. Are you still planning on having a fashion show? I read in the paper that this week is actually Fashion Week in the Twin Cities. And so are you guys going to be doing something, and do you try to, generally speaking, in normal times, time that with Fashion Week in the greater metropolitan area?
The answer is yes and no. Typically, Style Edina was developed in, 2017. And one of the first things I noticed here when I came here and started promoting the retail community is that our retail entities don't do anything together. They operate in silos, and there's a competitive nature between them. So because I was promoting the community as a shopping destination, I wanted to create an event that brought them together once a year to really be more community-esque and cooperative. We typically do it in the spring. I am conducting it this year, actually in a couple weeks. We've shifted it to fall. In the budget, I don't know that we budgeted it for 2022 because it's a question mark. But currently, it is an expense, and then we do take in some revenue selling tickets. However, we don't net anything. It's actually, I consider it a marketing program for our retailers.
Great, thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Other questions for Ms. Loberg? Anyone? I know that folks have worked hard on this budget for 2022, and I don't know, Manager Neal, we sit in on these meetings, both of us, and if you had any comments at all?
I don't have any comments other than to say that I do have an understanding of their budget, and I think it's appropriate for the scale of the operations.
Yep. And I think we got Jack Abdo here from Abdo and Abdo that does their accounting work, and we sit in on these meetings, and they're very conservative about how they go about their work, and through all of this turmoil, you can see that they've managed to conduct business pretty effectively. So if there are no further questions, you need a motion, Manager Neal, to approve the 2022 budget?
That's correct.
For the Explore Edina operation? Is there such a motion?
I'll move that.
Second.
We got a motion by Member Jackson, second by Member Anderson to approve the Explore Edina 2022 budget. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. All right, we'll see you at Fall Into the Arts.
See you at Fall Into the Arts. I hope to see you all there. Thank you so much for your time this evening. I appreciate it.
All right, and thank you, gentlemen, Mr. Ahrens and Mr. Abdo for being here as well. All right, we're going to move on now to the public hearing portion of the agenda. The Chamber Explore Edina annual report and budget approval was the only item in the special recognitions and presentations portion of the agenda this evening. The first public hearing matter we have is something that we visited about in the past, I'll say pre-COVID. It's a new term, I guess, PC. You got AD, BC, PC. Public hearing in this matter, introduction is going to be handled by Scott Neal, and it involves Wooden Hill Brewing Company, and it's revisiting an issue, as I said, that we dealt with pre-COVID. Manager Neal.
Thank you, Your Honor. And my introduction is going to be pretty brief. The consumption and display permit is something that we did have some discussion about and council support for pre-COVID. We had a request from a local entrepreneur, and I think we have the same request today. It is not something that our city has had much experience with, and we still haven't. And so we've got a short presentation tonight by our city clerk Sharon Allison just to give us a reminder, general reminder about what a consumption and display permit is. And then we've got the public hearing. We're happy to answer questions from council members as well.
Clerk Allison, welcome. See you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
Mayor Hovland and members of the council, this request is from Wooden Hill Brewing Company, who currently has a brewer tap room liquor license that is strictly for brewing and selling its own beer, and it's their desire to offer patrons other intoxicating beverage options. Sean is here tonight and can explain exactly how he intends to use the permit and answer any questions you may have. Since this is your first request for this type of permit, I'd like to give you some context about the consumption and display permit. For example, what is it? What is allowed? What is not allowed? Staff concerns, and council action tonight for consideration. In addition to questions that you may have for me, City Manager Neal, Attorney Dave Kendall, and Chief Milburn are also available to answer any questions you may have. So what exactly is a consumption and display permit? A simple definition is that it allows patrons to bring their own intoxicating beverages into an establishment to drink. What is allowed with this permit? All bottles of intoxicating beverages must always be in plain sight of the patrons or owner. All bottles of intoxicating beverages must also be in the possession and control of the patron or owner. Consumption and display is allowed every day, all day, when the establishment is open. The bartender or employees can serve liquid to the bottle owner for mixing intoxicating beverages. Minors must be with a parent or a guardian. And finally, inspections can be done by alcohol and gambling enforcement, as well as our Edina police. What is not allowed with this permit? The establishment is not allowed to sell intoxicating beverages. The establishment is not allowed to do what is referred to as pour and store, meaning the bartendant or employee cannot take bottles of intoxicating beverages from patrons or owners. And they cannot store or to serve to them, and they cannot store intoxicating beverages for their patrons. Additionally, the establishment cannot buy intoxicating beverages for patrons. And finally, consumption and display is not allowed between the hours of 1 a.m. and 8 a.m. Staff concerns. The permit holder, this is the first consumption and display permit that you are considering, and given what is allowed with a permit, staff's concerns are that because the permit holder is not serving the intoxicating beverages, there will be no direct control over intoxicating person continuing to drink or preventing minors from drinking. And lastly, there will be no police or security presence like we require for temporary intoxicating licenses. So tonight, as you consider this permit, I'd like to remind you that the ordinance does allow you to attach conditions. And since this is your first permit, you could consider, for example, a probationary period for, say, 6 months to a year, or requiring security at events. Tonight's staff's recommendation is for council to close the public hearing at noon on September 13th and continue action on till the September 21st City Council meeting. And I should add that this public hearing notice is on the Better Together website, and as of this evening, we had not received any comments at all. That concludes my presentation. Are there any questions?
Good. Thanks, Clerk Allison. Does anyone have questions for Clerk Allison? Member Jackson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Do you know, do our neighboring cities have a permit like this, and which ones have this permit?
Several do have this type of permit. I know that Minnetonka, Burnsville, I believe. Plymouth did, but they got rid of theirs several years ago. I'm not sure exactly why. It could be that they just weren't issuing any, and so, or there wasn't any request for any, and so they got rid of it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions for Clerk Allison at this point in time? Yes, Member Staunton?
So I'm just trying to understand, so is this, the difference between this and a temporary license would be that this permits them to allow the consumption of something other than the beer that they make during any hours they're open, other than that 1 a.m. to 8 a.m. slot?
That's correct, Councilmember Staunton.
So, and in the memo, it sounded like what had motivated this was the desire to host some events and be able to, open a bottle of champagne for a celebration. Obviously, they don't produce champagne at that facility. Is there some reason that they don't want to do the catering or the temporary license in order to accomplish that, or would this be needed even if we did a catering permit?
Probably would be needed even if there was a catering permit, and Sean will be able to answer that question for you.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Let's bring Sean Ewan up here. I know when we, as a council back in January 2020, decided to amend the code to allow this, this is the first application for a permit under that new ordinance. You had a pretty significant role as a owner of Wooden Hill in actually convincing this council this was a good thing to do, and I think it would be important for you with new council members in particular, and me for a refresher, maybe Member Staunton, telling us why you think this is important.
Yeah, absolutely. So Sean Ewan, co-founder at Wooden Hill Brewing Company. And the reason this all came about originally is as we've had a lot of people in the community enjoy the space and their time with us, a lot of them want to come back and host events like a wedding reception or somebody's birthday party. And on some of these events, particularly something like a wedding, but even some of these other ones, they'll have guests that might not be familiar with the space and are expecting to have wine or something like that, or when you think about a wedding reception, even to be able to have a champagne toast or something. As a brewer tap room, we can't allow that. We can't sell that type of product. We wouldn't be able to get a separate license to serve that product because I don't think we can get a separate catering license. It gets quite complicated with the tap room manufacturing side of it. There's a lot of unique statutes surrounding it. And it turns out that there are some other breweries in Minnesota that have had this same issue and ended up discovering that when a brewery is under a certain production size, when they're fairly small like we are, the state law does allow brewer tap rooms to have this special type of consumption and display permit to enable that what Ms. Allison just talked about, to have patrons to bring in other beverages. And for our case, it's only for the situation where a special event, they would like to be able to have wine or a toast or something like that they serve themselves. And for us, it's a difference between, actually, we lose a lot of people from the community that want to come and have that event with us, but then that's just a big sticking point for them, and we have to turn them away. And we want to keep, serving the community the best that we can, and we see this as something kind of a reasonable workaround to the issue with that. Now, it's something that we can't charge for. Staff can't touch it, and the intention isn't to. Obviously we want groups to be buying beer and food and enjoying their time, but if that's going to mean, having this this special permit to do that and create some new operations and rules on our side to do that, then we're all for it. So.
All right, I think more foundationally, I mean, the reason, as I recall, you came here in the first place is that when you think about what's allowed as a brewery or a tap room under state law, you can't just come to City Hall here and ask for a liquor license. You can't hold both of those things.
Right,
So
exactly.
people have been trying to figure out, how, you know, in your business have been trying to figure out how to solve that dilemma.
Yeah,
And that was the reason that we amended our code to allow this kind of activity to take place. So Clerk Ellison had a slide 7 that talked about some of the concerns about, okay, you're not serving them, so you don't have that same sort of potential control over consumption. You know, how do you address some of those concerns that she expressed
right. So
on
what we
slide
want-
7?
Yeah, and those are good concerns. What we want to do is create restrictions on our own customers that might do this at an event where they'd be required to set up in an area that our staff is in and otherwise serving our beer, and the staff isn't going to touch or serve what the guests bring in, but it's in a controlled area where in order for a guest to get a glass to go in and serve themselves, then they would have to come through and get ID'd by staff before they're allowed to go into that area to serve themselves. And so that's our way of making sure that it's controlled so that there's not just bottles floating out there. It would be required to be in a controlled area.
Yeah, so I know that, if I remember right, you've got an event room that you created
Right.
on kind of the south side of the premises. Is that what you're talking about? That would be that
Yep.
sort of controlled
Yes.
environment? People
Yes.
would be in there, and so they come in for a wedding reception or some kind of a party, and then how do your folks that go in there to check periodically on what they might need monitor some of the consumption activity?
Right, so staff does circulate around, and as part of their training and as far as even just in the regular tap room, every day we serve every week we serve thousands of people who staff's trained to be watching out for outward signs of intoxication, communicating with other members of staff if anything were to become an issue. And so we're already watching for that and not serving people who are appearing to be intoxicated. And in that case, we would also be making sure that they're not going and serving themselves. That's a point when staff has to intervene and have a conversation with that individual.
Other questions for Mr. Ewan at this point in time? No? Okay, all right, stand by. We may have some.
All right, thank you.
Is there anyone, I'm going to open this up for public testimony now. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to testify regarding this matter? All right, seeing no one coming forward, hearing nothing. Is there anyone online, Dan? No? Okay. Nobody online. I'm getting a negative head nod there, so there's nobody online that wishes to testify. The motion that Clerk Allison has proposed is consistent with what we've been doing on public hearing matters, and that's leaving the public hearing matter open until noon on the following week. In this case, it would be noon on September 13th, and then continue the action to the September 21 City Council meeting for decision. Is there a motion to close the public hearing at noon on September 13th and continue the action to the September 21 City Council meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Got a motion by Member Staunton, second by Member Anderson, to close the public hearing at noon on September 13 and continue the action to the September 21 City Council meeting involving the request for a new consumption and display permit for Wooden Hill Brewing Company. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. All right.
Thank you.
See you in a couple weeks. Next matter is one that Director Milner has, and it involves a right-of-way easement vacation request over in the Rolling Green neighborhood, 4904 Bywood West. Dr. Milner, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. Embodied in Resolution 2021-71 is a application to vacate easements at 4904 Bywood West. So this is the existing easements. It's 2 separate lots. The owner is the same for both lots, and they want to combine it into one lot. So that red box in the center is where there is some drainage and utility easements that were on those separate lots, but now they want to combine those 2 lots. So that's the location of the application in front of you this evening. We do not have a recommendation yet. We're still getting more information from the private utilities, but we would ask you to conduct the public hearing and then close it on Monday, and then I would come back at the next meeting and have a formal recommendation for you. So we have a little confusion on a couple utilities may still be there and not recommend vacating the easements if there's private utilities. So we don't have a recommendation yet. We're working with the owner of the property and private utilities, and we'll have a recommendation at the next council meeting when you make your final decision. So I'd recommend you make a motion to close the public hearing at noon on Monday, September 13th, and continue the action until September 21st. I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Right. Questions for Director Milner?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
So
Member
who,
Jackson.
thank you. Who holds these easements? Can you tell us? I couldn't read it. It was very tiny print.
The city owns them.
The
So
city
that's why
owns
you're
the
considering vacating them.
Okay.
They're public easements.
Okay, thank you. And then I noticed there was a lot of water around these 2 lots. If they vacate this easement, will utilities be able to get in? How necessary is that given the bodies of water around there?
We don't need it from a city perspective for pipes or utilities. The only concern that we're having is for these private utilities. The applicant is looking to build a separate garage, and they're going through the permitting process and any zoning requirements with anything they're doing on the property right now.
Okay, so you'll be able to access what you need if this easement goes away?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Director Milner at this point in time? Is there anyone here representing the applicant? All right. Do we have anybody that wishes to testify regarding this matter? I'm going to open it up for public testimony. The public hearing is now open. Anyone on the line? Dan?
We do not have anyone on the line.
I'm sorry.
We do not have anyone
Not
on
have
the line.
anyone. All right. Very good. All right. Understand the situation you're in, Director Milner. Is there a motion to close the public hearing on this right-of-way easement vacation request at 4904 Bywood West at noon on September 13th and continue the action to the September 21 City Council meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion by Member Jackson, a second by Member Staunton to close the public hearing on this right-of-way easement vacation request at 4904 Bywood West on September 13th at noon and continue the action to the September 21 City Council meeting. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. And then we have one further public hearing matter this evening, and we have modified the Southdale 2 Tif District in the past, and now this is proposed modification number 4 to the Southdale 2 Tax Increment Financing District Plan, and our Economic Development Manager, Bill Neuendorf, has the matter, and Nick Anhut, our public finance guru from Ehlers and Associates, is here as well to help us out. So thanks for being here. And I'll turn it now to Manager Neuendorf.
Yes, good evening. Thank you. My name is Bill Neuendorf. As you mentioned, I'm the city's Economic Development Manager. And the item in front of you this evening is that 4th modification that's recommended to the Southdale 2 Tax Increment District. There's a presentation in the packet. Just to preserve time, I'll run through it quickly, but of course, we're happy to answer any questions. I provided some background about the existing Tif District, as well as an update of where we are today. This district, as you recall, was created as a recovery effort from the 2008 Great Recession. This district was eventually created in 2011 with 3 general intentions: to encourage redevelopment in the area, job creation, and overall reinvestment. And we used legislation that was available at that time to create an 8-year economic development district that included the mall property itself over at Southdale, as well as most of the properties that encompass and encircle the mall. Back in that time, the economic forecast was not looking good for the center. From 2005 to 2011, the tax value had almost dropped in half. It was not the shining star for the community. So looking at where we are, this actually just goes back to 2009, but with the investment at the mall as well as around the mall, the values have recovered. Even with some of the instability of this past year, the fortunes of that whole area look much better than they did back in 2008, 9, and 10 when we first started to consider this type of activity. In the past years, we also received special legislative authority to use some of the incremental taxes to fund affordable housing. The economic development efforts in the district were highly successful. We saw 18 major redevelopment projects in the mall, in the parking lots, and around the perimeter. That doesn't include all the tenant remodels, the new businesses coming in and coming out, but those are major projects. We're not going to go through them, but I think everyone will recognize what they are. Oftentimes we're asked why the city provides tax increment to every project in town. Well, I included a summary of these 18 projects that happened in and around Southdale, and you'll notice that only one of them received a pledge of tax increment financing, and that was the very first project. It was a $5 million TIF-funded loan to the Southdale Center to really kick off and renew that energy and, frankly, the confidence in the area. None of the other projects that eventually happened around the mall and at the mall property received any tax increment dollars. So what the city did use those dollars for was for affordable housing. Because at the time that we created the original Tif District, the city did not have that affordable housing policy that we have today. So there's lots of new market rate housing that happened, new hotels, new commercial businesses, but we used the majority of the dollars from that tax increment district to fund projects throughout the community, and those are affordably priced housing projects for families, for seniors, for households of all sizes, and that's something that we like to continue to do. This district has a very short life. It expires at the end of this year, so we're down to just a few months. So based on the advice of our financial advisors over at Ellers Associates, they noticed that it's time to update the budget. And in the title of this resolution, it's modification number 4. We've taken similar actions over the years 3 other times. This is the 4th, and we think the final time that we're going to make this type of modification. When it comes to tax increment, you've seen some of these charts before, and right now the city has 10 TIF districts throughout town, and they account for about 5% of the city's overall tax base. At the end of the year, when the TIF district expires, that 5% rate that's included for TIF will be substantially reduced because most of that is within this particular TIF district. So the recommendation tonight and what's the basis of this public hearing is just one final change to the budget of that TIF district. It's in sections 2-9 and 2-10 of the actual financing plan itself, and it's simply a budget modification that recognizes the current tax values in that district. The intention here is to be able to create more funding available for affordable housing. We have until the end of the year to do that. There seems to continue to be will and desire to provide housing that's affordable at several income levels, and this is one of the things, one of the steps that can happen to fund that affordable housing. No other changes are suggested or recommended at this time. We're not changing the boundaries, we're not extending the district, not changing the purpose nor the intended outcomes, simply modifying that budget. It's a fairly simple procedure, but it's a procedure that we always follow the state law, and that includes public outreach, talking to the schools, the county, as well as the general citizens of Edina. So the public hearing this evening is to collect any comment that might be out there. And at the conclusion of the public hearing, of course, we'll come back and ask you to make a final decision about whether or not to approve that budget modification. So with that, I'll leave it there. Happy to answer any questions. Also, Nick Anhut from Ellers is here this evening. He's also available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Neuendorf. That was an excellent presentation. Concise and information-packed, I think. Anybody have questions for Manager Neuendorf at this point in time? All right, let's open this matter up for public testimony. The proposal is going to be that the Southdale 2 tax increment financing district plan be modified to adjust the budget to reflect current market value increases. And is there anyone in the audience who wishes to come forward and testify? All right. Hearing nothing and seeing no one coming forward, Dan, do we have anybody on the line that wishes to testify?
We do have one caller. It's Lori Groats. So if the operator can unmute Lori Groats' line, she can go ahead and speak.
All right, very good. Ms. Groats, can you hear me?
Yes, Lori Groats, 5513 Park Place. I have one comment and I have a question also. My comment is regarding Mr. Neuendorf had said that none of these projects that were listed in his presentation had received any TIF dollars. I just wanted to clarify to anybody that might be watching the meeting, there were several apartment buildings there. The reason I believe they did not request nor receive any TIF monies was at this time when those apartments were built, the city did not have an affordable housing policy that required new apartment buildings to have 10% of their units be affordable. So the apartment buildings would not be asking for TIF. Apartment builders do not pay for affordable housing. That is paid for by taxpayers through TIF. So I just wanted to clarify that. Also, I have a question, please, on the proposed budget modification on uses of tax increment funds. There's a category that says other qualifying improvements, $6 million. I understand what the uses for the TIF were on some of the other categories, but I don't understand, I don't know what other qualifying improvements are. So maybe if you'll tell us, please, what was $6 million spent on? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Groats. Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor, we do not have any additional callers.
Other qualifying improvements, $6 million. I understand what...
Getting feedback. Her testimony is coming through again. Can you?
Yeah, I can take care of that. I believe that's the delay on the WebEx.
Okay. All right. Manager Neuendorf, I don't know if you want to answer those questions or respond to the comments that were made with regard to some of the projects that are listed as not getting any TIF or actually pre-TIF projects, so they shouldn't have been on the list, or whether you want to respond to what other qualifying improvements means, what are they, and how much, and how was the $6 million spent? If you want to wait for a couple of weeks to do that, you're certainly welcome, or you can do it now.
Happy to answer that right now.
Thank you.
Yep. Yeah. So in regards to projects that didn't ask for TIF, there's lots of reasons and lots of strategies that developers use to finance projects. They typically ask for tax increment financing or public financing when there's a significant budget gap in the developments that happened in this area. There wasn't a financial gap, so the city didn't offer TIF and wasn't requested. And as far as the $6 million in the line items here, I'll take a quick glance over at Nick Anhut. He can correct me if I'm off here a bit. But as with most budgets, these are targets, so they're not necessarily audited expenses looking backward, but they're budgets looking forward. And for the other qualifying expenses or other qualifying improvements, the largest number was the $5 million loan that we gave to Southdale Center Mall. But that's one of the many different types of improvements and investments we can make with these tax increment dollars. We can fund land acquisition. We can fund actual construction of affordable housing. We can fund site improvements, both on the mall property or other off-site properties as well, for affordable housing. Not for any other project, but only affordable housing. That's the extent of the legislation that we have. But the short answer to the question is that $5 million of the $6 million went to Simon Properties in that initial TIF loan. And as we increased the budget, we increased that a little bit. At this point, we haven't spent the money. We're asking for your permission to modify the budget so that we can spend the money, and those dollars would be spent on a future affordable housing project to be identified. The site has not been located at this moment. And that's the short and long answer.
Very good. Thank you. Questions for?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Manager Neal.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify a bit more about the question and that particular slide in Mr. Neuendorf's presentation. I think if his language was around the impression that is frequently, I think, asked to council members that why does the city always contribute TIF to every development in town? That's really an inaccurate impression. And so that slide, I think, goes to kind of refuting that, for one, but also showing you the amount of economic development and growth that's been leveraged by really a relatively very small investment in the mall. And it's just been, it's been an incredible 10 years to see what that has created there for this community, that every taxpayer in the community benefits from.
The way I understood that part of her inquiry was, are we sure that all the 18 projects that you named were TIF eligible projects? Or were some of them projects that occurred before we had a TIF district in place? That's the way I interpreted what she was saying.
To confirm that, each of these 18 projects that were in the district occurred after we created that boundary that established the tax increment district. There were a couple projects nearby, the little Phoenix Plaza, an old gas station, that happened before the TIF district. Things that happened before are not included on the list. This is only projects that are completed within the time frame of the TIF district and within the geographic boundaries of the TIF district.
Yeah, I think that your presentation tells quite a tale of looking at the worst of situations. I think the question back in 2008, even before that, from people in our community, one of the dominating questions was, what's happening to Southdale? What's going to happen to Southdale? And we made that loan to them. Simon invested in the refurbishing of the mall, and then that gave confidence to all those property owners around there to do something with those properties. And the outcome has been really, as Manager Neal says, quite extraordinary, I think. So anyway, is there a motion to close the public hearing on this matter? The proposed modification number 4 of the Southdale 2 Tax Increment Financing District Plan at noon on September 13th, and continue the action on the matter to the September 21 City Council meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Got a motion by Member Jackson, second by Member Staunton, that we close the public hearing at noon on September 13th, continue the action regarding the proposed modification number 4 to the Southdale 2 Tax Increment Financing District Plan to the September 21 City Council meeting. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion as stated say aye. 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 Opposed? Carried. All right, that completes the public hearing portion of the agenda. Mr. Anhut, thanks for being with us this evening. You may be sticking around a little bit here. Next, we're going to go to reports and recommendations, and the first matter we have here, Director Milner has it, and it's the request to approve a drainage right-of-way easement vacation at 7300 Clarendon Drive.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, members of council. I won't do a presentation. This was one item that we reviewed at the last council meeting. So this was just a follow-up. So I did find in the report, we did note there was no comments from the engagement in the introduction of the cover page like we talked about upstairs.
Yeah, thanks for that reminder that we talked about that before the meeting this evening. This was one we held a public hearing on a couple weeks ago.
Correct. So we
All right.
received no comments, and staff would recommend you approve Resolution 2021-65, approving the vacation of that easement at 7300 Clarendon Drive.
All right, is there anyone on the council that cares to make that motion?
So moved.
Motion and second. Motion by Member Anderson, second by Member Staunton. With respect to the motion as stated by Director Milner. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adopting Resolution 2021-65, which would approve the drainage right-of-way easement vacation at 7300 Clarendon Drive, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Next matter is one that Director Teague has, and see Mr. Spirides is with us tonight. That's good. Talk about sketch plan review at 7300 West Bush Lake Road. And that is next to the Minnesota Made property out there.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Members of the council, as mentioned, this is part of the Minnesota Made site in the industrial park. There's an outdoor rink just south of their existing indoor rinks that they would remove, and they're proposing to build a 22,000 square foot training facility. Right now, users of the facility, they have a training center to the north, up in the commercial node to the north, but they'd like to relocate that or locate that closer to the existing ICE facilities. This request would require a subdivision with a lot size variance from 2 acres to 1.1 acre, a site plan review, a parking stall variance. They would be looking at a shared parking arrangement with the property to the north. So a parking study would be needed to make sure there's enough parking there. Also a building coverage variance from 30% to 45%. The Planning Commission did a sketch plan review also, and generally looked favorably on this. One interesting piece that they talked about was, you'll note that there's no sidewalks or bike facilities within this area. But part of their discussion was, as we look at projects in the Southdale District too, how does the site fit into the neighborhood? And the thinking being, it would be a good idea to provide a sidewalk there. Users of tournaments might want to walk to the brewery to the south, or possibly to the commercial node to the north. So we thought it would be a good idea to put a sidewalk in, and maybe even consider a future easement for a connection to the north. So it would just, with those comments, I would introduce Nick Spirides, and he's going to provide a little more detail for the project.
Thank you. Mr. Spirides, welcome. Haven't seen you for a while.
Always nice to be here. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. If I could have you put the site plan that I presented. There we go. Thank you. Always a pleasure and honor to be back in my home city. It's a rather simple sketch plan commentary. We're looking for your opinions and thoughts. Mr. McBain, who's the owner of Minnesota Made Hockey, is unable to be here this evening. And his basic premise is, in order to do this facility to replace the first athlete training center located in the retail area to the north, he wants to replace it, but adding on to this building at the old tennis club is a little difficult because of the structure, so some technical feasibility issues occur. Number two, if he wants to do this as one property, he would have to refinance the entire Minnesota Made facility, which, as you know, might involve bringing up all the partners and cash flow. It just became very complicated. So his council suggested, what about a lot split? So that's when he contacted me to do minimal design and drawing to just show how big of a building, 20,000 to 22,000 is his goal to replace the facility, maintain a 20-foot setback on each side of each building, to the south of the existing building and the north of the new building, and just see what we could put in there. So In working with Mr. Teague, we found that we don't meet the 2-acre lot minimum, so we'd need 1.15 is where we're at. The lot coverage from 30% to 45. The parking is really not an issue as he owns the property to the north, and he'll obviously grant himself an easement to park there. The facility is occupied mostly by young hockey players doing training, so it's a perfect scenario to be right next door. Currently, if the kids are training at First Athlete, if they're walking to the arena, they're jumping across the railroad tracks, so that's a big part of it as well. Bernie has no issue with granting an easement for a future connection. The extension of sidewalk, if that's part of the plan, we don't have a problem with that either. So we're amiable to the parking study. He has an arrangement with adjacent properties since his heaviest usage of the arena is during tournaments on the weekends. The church across the street, they grant him the use of the parking lot, the businesses, as long as they talk about it, 6 times a year. So just looking for your input to see if we should proceed before he invests in significant design dollars, stormwater management, engineering, all of that. You bet.
Questions for Mr. Freeze or comments on this plan matter? Member Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. Spreedes. Good evening.
Good evening.
I just kind of wondering, you're pulling a sheet of ice out to create a dryland training facility there. And I'm just kind of wondering, would that be the same ownership completely all the way through, or would there be separate ownership in the dryland training center?
It would be the same ownership for the most part, maybe a few partners different, but it would be Mr. McBain. The current ice rink is an outdoor ice rink, and it's been, for the most part, disabled and taken down.
It's always been tough to be around that particular sheet of ice.
Right.
It gets pretty cold and it turns into ice around the outside. Well, I just would say that everything that we can do to create opportunity for youth sports in Edina is a good idea. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Member Jackson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to confirm that the existing building continues to be on the lot size that's permitted for that area. Is that correct?
To the best of my knowledge, everything's been approved as it was originally conceived, yes.
Okay, so it doesn't make it 2 small lots. It makes one normal size lot and one a small lot.
Correct. The property to the north would meet the 2-acre minimum proposal or requirement. It's just this property to the south, just to allow him to separately finance it is really the main reason.
Very good, thank you.
Member Staunton?
Just a question for Mr. Teague. Is this property in the area that will be part of the Cahill study?
This is.
So, so I don't, you guys have a very established use there, and it makes sense to add this, but one of the things I would suggest is to keep an eye on what's happening in that Cahill study as you're moving forward. And that may end up meaning sidewalks or the like. All I'm saying is we just want to think to the future about the surrounding uses and how you fit into those as you move forward.
Correct. I've been interfacing with this particular property for close to 25 years as a hockey coach, and it's really a very positive environment, a lot of families, a lot of activities, so I'm certain that Bernie wants to maintain that with the training center. And it's truly just to replace the First Athlete Training Center. He's currently a tenant in the building, so he has the opportunity now to.
Yeah, and where is that? Is it across the railroad tracks? Is that?
It's next to across the street from the TJ's restaurant in the Cahill area.
So kind of north and west.
Yeah, next door to the former Waldorf Nevins Cleaners site.
Got it.
Oh,
Okay.
got it. That bigger warehouse-style building where they have dance classes, and then he's got
did some karate and various things.
Yeah, so I just think as you're thinking about the future of this area, and the future use of this property, I think it's a great anchor use for the neighborhood, but just think expansively about what else might be in the neighborhood in the future and how you can fit in with that. And that might be sidewalks, that might be bikes, that might be a place to eat for some of the people who use that facility. I'm not sure we want the kids going down to the brewery, but But maybe some of the parents might sneak down there and when the training is happening. So.
On tournament weekends, the facility, I've had, TJ's restaurant and the Chinese food, and I mean, it gets pretty busy around there. So they'll run 20 to 30 teams on a weekend, and I know that they'll even rent ice at the Braemar facility and have as part of the tournament. So there's a lot of movement back and forth.
Yeah, and I'd encourage you to encourage your client to participate as we move forward with that Cahill planning, because it's going to be an important piece of the whole puzzle, and
I will do that.
What kinds of things that that center could use as amenities or complementary uses in the neighborhood would be really helpful to know.
Mm-hmm. Part of the, there were some new requirements put in this district about exterior materials and windows and things, and he's very open to creating a rather nice looking facade, not so industrial. So he just wanted to make sure we weren't going to run into some serious opposition to these variances that we might be looking for, but he's prepared to move forward rather quickly with all the engineering and architecture. So,
yeah, all right, thank you.
Very good. Really appreciate all of your input, and good to see you all again.
Yeah, you too, Mr. Spreedes. I just tell you, the only thing that gives me a little bit of pause is parking. I guess we'll hear how you're going to deal with that, but it could be a potential concern. The requests on the variance for lot size, I get the use, as Member Stoughton says, it's a compatible use. I think that's a good observation, and this Minnesota Made has been there for almost a decade now, I think, and existed well in the neighborhood, and they've been able to figure out how to make things work. So I look forward to seeing it at the next phase.
Good. If I could just make a comment on your question about parking. Generally speaking, this facility, it'll be a 100-foot by 160-foot turfed area. So the parking demand won't be high because kids are out playing team sports, et cetera. So Minnesota Made is prepared to work with the traffic study people to show historic counts, and it's not a heavy patron use on the interior, so the parking count requirement for this is pretty low, and we'll work with the parking study to prove that out.
Yeah, it seems like you may not even have an incremental increase because they're there. I mean, they're skating or they're working out, but we'll see what the parking study shows. That's the only thing that it's kind of ignited my interest a little bit, but I think it's a potential really great use for the area, and as Member Anderson says, it's if we're the epicenter of hockey in Minnesota, this gives us a chance to kind of build on that reputation, and then if we can get Braemar rehabbed, and Member Anderson's worked on that team too, looking at what needs to be done over there, we're going to be in fabulous shape for a decade plus. So,
I'm a hockey guy, so I couldn't be more excited.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thank you. Good to see you all.
We'll see you sometime soon.
Indeed.
We're down to the last item on the main portion of the agenda, which is the presentation on the staff recommendation on the spending plan, what's called the final spending plan for Edina's American Rescue Plan funds, round one, which would be the funds that I think we've presently got in our possession. And the second tranche is coming next year. We're not going to get ahead of ourselves. We're going to deal with round one first and deal with the money in hand.
That's right.
And so you're going to talk about that a little bit, Manager Neal.
Yeah. Thank you, Your Honor, members of council. Tonight, staff are seeking your approval of the implementation plan for round one of our American Rescue Plan Act spending plan. This plan was developed through some interaction with staff, some public engagement. I showed you the first broad thematic look at how we could do a spending plan for these funds back in June on June 15th, earlier this summer. At that time, I shared what the themes might be and what the spending plan might be. asked you to give some consideration to it on July 21st. On the July 21st council meeting date, I shared the same plan with you with one change to it, and that change was to include a public health permitting software package of approximately $300,000 as an eligible expense that would be funded with these funds. The council had a pretty vigorous discussion about the proposal. I gave you a proposal that covered both tranches, as the mayor recalled, and you gave approval to one and said let's hold off on the second one. So staff took your initial approval, at least in the tentative phase of the plan, and did further development of it during the month of August. And most of that development was done with some assistance from Annie Coyle. Annie is a former city management fellow. She was here in 2013 and 14. Annie's in the audience this evening, and she can help answer some questions tonight if there are any about individual details here. But what's in front of you tonight is the July 21st version of the spending plan it's mostly the same, but with one I would characterize significant change from what you looked at on July 21st, and that's in the area of the particular area of community broadband expansion. When we had the original discussion back on June 15th and again on July 21st, there was an idea, or the concept was, we would provide some capital funding to a broadband partner, a private broadband partner, to extend broadband services or broadband lines in the community to certain parts of the community that were perhaps disadvantaged parts of the community. That's certainly one way to do this, but that process would take years. And in terms of planning, permitting, construction, and even to get the private party to put their own funds into the project. We found a different way to accomplish the same end goal. And the end goal was, how do we provide a solid, reliable access to broadband, home broadband services in parts of town where maybe there are disadvantaged populations. So we had a pretty good conversation with Comcast. They have a program called Internet Essentials, which would allow us to essentially buy and subsidize internet service in individual homes through a coding process. We can use the funds. ARPA funds are eligible to do this. Schools have done this quite a lot across the country. Cities, not so much. We have had some interest and there's some evidence that there are folks who could take advantage of a better broadband connection for work and educational purposes who maybe don't have kids in school. So that's where this comes from. We could also hit populations that do not have kids in Edina public schools, for example, as well. So that's the major change. We're allocating the same amount of money to that. There's a marketing and a vetting program that would be developed to go along with that. It would be new and innovative for our city, but it's not new and innovative overall because, as I said, schools have been using the Internet Essentials program for more than a year, and so it's a well-developed program. That is my description of how we got here tonight. Be happy to answer any questions about the individual programs or priority areas.
Questions from council members or comments? Yes, Member Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I've got a number of questions. The first one is, first I just want to make a comment that I'm very pleased that we've included the Edina Education Fund in their Heal Together campaign with this. I know this has been very stressful on our kids, and I'm just so pleased that we're able to help them out. And related to that, with the mental health, the expansion of the mental health unit with the police department, is there any kind of metric on this? I mean, I think there's been a real need overall, pre-COVID even, for mental health support, but this is COVID related. And is there any sort of sunsetting or measurement that's going to be part of this? Because I'm reluctant to commit to another employee that we won't be able to fund when the ARPA funds are gone. So if you can sort of talk about the plan for the long-term aspect of this hire.
Yeah. Councilmember Jackson, members of council, that is priority area 1. That's mental health assistance expansion. From a formatting standpoint, we have put this report together so we describe what the priority area is, we establish what the goals were or that we're trying to achieve, we talk a little bit about how we plan to achieve those, and provide you some examples of performance measures. And those are important because there's an accountability process that happens with this funding back to the federal government to show you how we did it. I think implicit in the expansion of the police department mental health unit, there would be the need to ramp up our own tax levy to cover that employee going forward. This provides sufficient amount of funds in the short term to make that ramping up much more feasible going forward. But I think that would be an expectation. If it proves to be successful in terms of how effective it is in assisting the police, and our initial findings with the program that we've had is that it is effective.
Thank you. And then I think we've had a good track record with VEEP distributing the rental assistance, but I know in cities nationwide there have been problems reaching people who need rental assistance, even though it's there. What do we have in place to make sure that, or to try and reach people and to get that aid out into the hands of people who need it?
Thank you. I think that is a concern that we have heard before. I think one of the big differences in the rental assistance that we're proposing to provide this time is that we are going to propose that they be allowed to use some of that fund to support their internal admin features that would allow them the more staff to actually do what they're supposed to do. You know, it's if you think about it, it is intuitive that it takes a number of people on staff to start this program and to make it function. And we were among several different funders telling them, we don't want you to use our money for admin services. We want you to use our money in our community. And that's fine, but if everybody tells them that, they don't have they're not able to build the systems internally to spend the money. And so I think other funders are finding the same thing. And so we're going to be a little bit more judicious with them this year to allow them to do that.
And VEEP feels pretty confident that they'll have a measure of success with this.
Yes.
Okay, terrific. And then my final question is about the community health software. And I see that there's reporting on bias in this. And I wonder how this would work with our new program through the Human Rights and Relations Commission, where there's a bias event reporting through the police department. And is there, when we set up a new software system and we've got another system, I'm always concerned about whether we can get that data together, and is there a way to do that? And have we considered that? And will we have this information siloed, or will we be able to integrate it?
Councilmember Jackson, members of council, that's a good question. I'm not sure that we would. I think the bias event or incident is separate from actions that are requiring permits. We could take a look at that. If we can, we will, just to make it more simple. But I think at this point, those are going to be two different kinds of reporting mechanisms. But we can take a look at that.
Yeah, perhaps maybe there's just a final report or an annual report that's included to the HRRC when we make the police report as well. So maybe the software isn't integrated, but that we do have a joining together of that, so we have a sense of where we are in the community.
Okay. Yes.
And those are my questions. Thank you.
Other questions for Manager Neal? Member Anderson?
Just more of a, actually I'd welcome the chief's comment on the question that Member Jackson brought up relative to mental health. And I suppose, is this a full-time position that we'd pick up for a year? And is that the thought there?
Well, I think the thought, Councilmember Anderson, members of council, I think the thought at this point is to provide ourselves the flexibility to do this as a staff person or to do it as a contracted service from Hennepin County. That's the model that we're using right now. There are some pretty significant advantages to us to do this as a contracted service from the county. And so we are continuing to explore that. They're open to that as well as they see more of their social worker folks kind of getting deployed in communities like Richfield and Edina. That's what we've done before. But we want to give ourselves the ability to have that as a staff person if we need to.
Yeah, I think, and the reason I would invite the chief's comment is that it feels to me that one of the things that happens, and especially over the last year or so, is that a great deal of responsibility falls to police that they may not be really fully prepared for or even trained to, but they take it on because it's a public service. And so it feels to me as if when you employ mental health expertise and bring that into the community as an assistance, it not only sharpens the effect of the PD's work in the community, but it also relieves some of that burden so that you're going forward on your important work. Do you agree or disagree with that? And it's more of a statement than a question, but I welcome your comment.
Sure. Councilmember Anderson. That is correct. Officers do need help with this work in the field, and so much of the work ahead and planning is to integrate social workers to help in the response model and also on the back end of data collection and also connecting resources. And oftentimes there's a lot of follow-up that's required to help connecting those resources after an event or after a 911 call is made. And so that is part of the planning process here as well, is to help through this funding and through that, these added staff members, is to integrate that and also provide those services that are most important for people in crisis. Additionally, we are in communication with Hennepin County social workers and management teams, and also Hennepin County Sheriff's Office to try and incorporate our work into that, so that it isn't just Edina, but it also blends into our suburban nearby agencies and also on the county platform as well.
Thank you very much. That clarifies. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Sutton, anything?
Yeah, those are all great questions. One other question that I had was, I wasn't able to attend the last HRA meeting, but I did get a chance to watch it, and you all had a robust discussion about the theater. And there was some discussion as part of that about whether the ARPA funds might be available to help with that. And my question is whether they are, and if so, what bucket or buckets do they come out of in your memo?
Thank you, Councilmember Staunton, members of council. So yes, we have determined that the theater is absolutely an example of a business that was negatively impacted by the pandemic, and so they are definitely eligible to receive ARPA funding in some form or fashion. We know that we have proposed to allocate $200,000 of ARPA funds for that project. We know that's not going to be enough in terms of assisting the parties who are trying to get together right now to make the theater a going concern. So there will be additional funds that we will approach the council to seek to provide to those folks. That additional money, we are looking at our Southdale 2 Tif District funds that are remaining and unallocated for the balance of the year. That'll be a separate discussion, but that there's more than sufficient funds in that bucket of money to accomplish that task.
Terrific. Well, I know there's a lot more discussion to have on that front about who and how and all that, and that's not for tonight, but unless we want to make the over. But I'm pleased to hear that some of this money might be available for it. Thanks.
Yeah.
Don't give Member Anderson any ideas. He's going to go on a minor filibuster. Excuse me. I like the primary emphasis around mental health. I've been in several meetings now with the League of Minnesota Cities where Member Staunton was on the board for several years. And if he asks the league right now, and we all know this, but for the general public, what's the number one problem facing cities in the state of Minnesota? They'll say mental health challenges. And so to have this primary emphasis around mental health, whether it's in the school district or in the general population, and we've got some folks in the audience tonight that are really keenly interested in this topic, and others as well, I'm sure, around food assistance and rental assistance. This is a good area of emphasis, I think. The one thing I've developed a concern about is something that Member Jackson raised, and that's the capacity of VEAP to handle effectively rental assistance, because I've had some calls from people in our community that have been struck down with unemployment, with cancer, sometimes the same person can't pay their rent. They're supposed to be getting rental assistance from the state. Months and months and months have gone by and nothing's happened, and also applied through VEAP, and nothing's happened there either. And so I'm really wondering, you know, the question that was begged for me from Member Jackson's inquiries was, well, where is that data about how long it takes them from the time to get an application in the door? How extensive is that application? How much, you know, could it be simplified or streamlined and still allow them to validate whether that person is a person that really needs assistance and get it back out the door again? I think we ought to know that, because I personally feel like we've been through this experience at the Edina Community Foundation with the COVID Relief Fund, getting funds out to people. I think Ms. Rendelman worked on some of that activity. And I think that there's some really highly qualified volunteers in our own community that we would not have to expand the capacity of our government to do it, but there are people that are volunteers that would be more than willing to step up and have the capacity intellectually and the energy to do this work if we thought it was necessary. But I would really be cautious about just turning over that sum of money to VEAP without some further vetting of whether or not they can get money to the people in our community that need it in a timely manner. So that's my one cautionary note, I guess.
It included in the implementation plan is reference to the fact that we would enter into a written agreement with them for both the food assistance and rental assistance, and that will definitely be an issue that we will cover. But they are a trusted partner. They're a well-respected nonprofit in terms of carrying out the mission. We know they can do it. We think that they are going to have additional funds to kind of gain new staff and be able to carry out this program better than previously.
Okay.
But we will pay attention to that, and we'll share that information with you going forward with their performance measures.
All right. So on the first go around here, you had 2.4 million to be spent in 2021, and now it's up to 2.7. How much do we have? Do we have 2.7 or do we have 2.4? Because of
2.4, but by the time this money actually goes, by the time all of this money goes out the door, the other tranche will be here. So that part of it is there's not a cash flow issue.
So we're thinking about dipping into that second tranche a little bit.
Or we supplement it with other
Okay.
federal funds that we got. Either way.
If you get really in a tough spot, Nikki Williams is out in the audience, and she can bring that band that she's got that played at the high school parking lot, the parents' band, and she can sing anything that you want her to sing.
I will.
And we can have a real fundraiser to make that, fill the gap, bridge that gap.
We will take Ms. Williams up on that offer, kind offer that she's making. Yeah.
All right. So you would like a motion to approve the final spending plan for Edina's American Rescue Act Plan Funds Round 1.
Yes, sir.
Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Member Staunton, second by Member Jackson, to approve the final spending plan we have been provided with for Edina's American Rescue Act Plan Funds Round 1. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adopting the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. All right. Thanks, folks, for coming in tonight and caring about this issue. And nice to have you here too, Andrea. You try to sneak out. Good night, ladies. All right. Commission correspondence. We've got that provided to us. Aviation noise update. I don't have anything. Manager Neal.
I don't either.
Okay. Mayor and council comments. Let's start with Member Anderson.
Thank you. I actually have, I've been giving some thought to our both Saturday and Sunday this weekend. Saturday is actually a couple of residents have organized a observation for 9/11, and that is, I believe, on Saturday afternoon from 1 to 4. And as the mayor mentioned earlier in our work session, I know that there's a presentation at around 2 o'clock. On Sunday afternoon, there is in this room an open mic opportunity for people to speak to bias, discrimination, hate experiences in the community, as well as a roundtable discussion, which I believe the mayor is part of as well. And I think that's going to be a very, very interesting 2 hours, and I'm hoping that the public is well aware of that and has the opportunity to attend. That's all I have tonight.
Thank you. Member Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, this was a solemn week, starting with Memorial Day and the loss of baby Iklas, and and then we're looking at the anniversary of 9/11. And I just wanted to thank our first responders for their outstanding work overall, but also this week. It was a very sad and somber day, and I so appreciate your professionalism, and to Chief Slama as well. So thank you very much. And we all remember 9/11 and that day when the first responders rushed into the falling towers, and we remember that it's a hard job, and we really appreciate your professionalism and your caring for our community. So that's the somber part. I saw in our consent agenda that we're approving or taking recognition of the work done on the 9 Mile Creek restoration project. My home is very near 9 Mile Creek, and I'm really pleased with the job that they've been doing. The erosion is dramatically changed. The creek is much more stable and clean than it used to be, and I wanted to acknowledge all the Edina residents who serve on both of our watershed districts. I know we've got residents that serve on both the Minnehaha watershed district and on the 9 Mile Creek, and it's just such important work. Water's a key part of Edina, and I'm so pleased to see 9 Mile Creek stabilized. And similar to that, the draft climate action plan is now available for comment on Better Together Edina. So it's bettertogetheredina.org, and I hope the community will take time to read through it and comment it. I personally have not had a chance to read it yet, but I know that the comment period has opened, and I'm looking forward to reading it, and thank the task force that's been working on that, but also encourage citizens and residents to speak up and tell us what they think. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Jackson. Member Sutton?
A couple of thoughts. One, I just wanted to pick up on one of the points that Member Jackson mentioning the 9 Mile Creek. As some of you know, I've recently moved, and I live now closer to the 9 Mile Trail, and what a terrific resource. It just, that quarter-mile loop through the kind of wetlands there is just a terrific piece of work, and kudos to you, Mr. Mayor. I know you were on the council back when you approved that, and the council members who were with you. That was a terrific piece of visionary work, and it's really enhanced the neighborhood and the community, so good stuff. The other thing I did want to raise, in community comment tonight, we got an inquiry about vaccinations and the like. And I think I share the same frustration that everybody in the room does, that we're all having to wear masks, which makes it harder for everybody. and it's something we have to do, but it's a function of the fact that we can't get enough people vaccinated. My sense is that our community is doing quite well on that, and I'd love to see some numbers about that, about any metrics we have about how we're doing in this community and how we can think from a data-driven perspective about what the right things to do are here, both with our staff to protect our staff and with people who come to events, you know, to council chambers, making sure they're safe, making sure we're safe, but also trying to get to a place where we don't have to be muzzled during our meetings. It makes it harder to hear each other, it makes it harder to see each other, it makes it harder to interact with each other. So I'm all for getting that over with as quickly as possible, but I think getting some more information maybe on a regular basis about what we know about the status of the vaccination of our population here in Edina and maybe in Hennepin County and broader might help us to make some decisions on that front. So just raise that point.
Yeah, thank you, Member Stott. Thanks, everybody. Just a reminder on the event that Member Anderson alluded to, the 9/11 anniversary event. It will be down at Utley Park, which is where the Veterans Memorial is. And it is, I think, 1 to 4. And then the program is at 2, and it's just a short program. I think both of our new chiefs are going to try to be there. We'll hopefully get them there. They may want to make a few comments. They've asked me to make a couple of comments, but it'll be very short. We got the band director and the school superintendent are able to get a couple of trumpet players there to play taps, and there'll be some other music. And last I heard, they were working on an ice cream truck and a few other things, but it won't be a long program, but it will be impactful, I think. And I want to thank both of our chief public safety officials for agreeing to come down there on Sunday or Saturday afternoon. And I think that's it for me. Manager Neal?
Thank you, Your Honor. Just one quick one, and that is to, again, kind of continue the theme of the COVID-19 vaccination discussion. We are seeing, in fact, we saw earlier this afternoon that Mayor Fry in Minneapolis has issued an executive order, an emergency order, that lays out mandatory vaccinations for city employees in Minneapolis. That would be the first such action in Minnesota. The President has issued a similar sort of executive order later this afternoon as well that can cover as many as 100 million people in this country. So we are seeing that next step being taken in terms of requiring vaccinations in order to work in public settings. So we are looking at that, and we're having a lot of discussions with our own staff about how do we react to that? Do we have options? Do we not have options? Those two particular things are brand new to us. So we will be spending more time taking a look at that and seeing how that could impact our operations here.
Good. Thank you. That prompt anything further from council members? We've got a little bit more work to do this evening as the HRA that saved us from a tomorrow morning meeting. So we're going to adjourn this meeting, and then we need to wait for a moment to let them switch everything over in the back room. And I think, Dan, you can maybe advise us when they're ready to go. Is there a motion to adjourn the council meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
I got a motion and second. Member Anderson, Member Staunton, to adjourn the city council meeting. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. City council meeting of September 9th, 2021 stands adjourned.